Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Interview Skills with Nationwide Building Society. I'll pass you over to Isabel Plater, who will give you the introduction to the session. So, Isabel, over to you.
Thank you, Alex. Hi, everyone. Hope everyone's doing well. Really excited to be delivering this webinar to you today on interview skills with myself and my colleague Elle. Just to give you a brief introduction on me, my name is Isabel and I'm a Technology Development Program Specialist at Nationwide Building Society. So I am responsible for running the Technology Development Program, which is a careers program for graduates, career changers, apprentices. We'll go into a bit more detail about that in a moment. And I've been at Nationwide now for about 9 months. And prior to Nationwide, I've worked in different student and graduate recruitment teams. By my colleague Elle, who will give a short introduction as well.
Hi everyone, I'm Elle and I joined Nationwide last September on the Technology Development Programme. So at the minute I am a software engineer at Nationwide and I have been since then really. And we're here to talk to you about interview skills. So I'll pass back to Isabel too.
Brilliant, thank you. So just to run through quickly what we'll be covering today. So we'll just have a bit of an introduction to Nationwide and the Technology Development Programme, otherwise known as TDP. How to research when you're doing an interview, different types of interview questions, interviewing virtually, what questions to ask the interviewer, and then we'll go through Elle's experience of interviewing for the Technology Development Programme and also kind of general discussion about TDP as well. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to just drop them in the chat and we can answer either as we go along or at the end. And if anyone has any questions afterwards, once we finish the webinar, then feel free to drop questions into our Discord channel. We'll be monitoring that over the next few days as well. So to get started, introduction to Nationwide and TDP. So just going to run through quickly who Nationwide are, what we do, and a bit more about the Technology Development Programme. So a lot of you may recognise Nationwide as looking something like this, as a branch on the high street. Is where most of our branches are. So Nationwide is the largest building society in the world, and we have over 15 million members across the UK. We're a mutual builder society, which means that we don't have shareholders. Everything that we do is for the benefit of our members. And just to give you quick kind of facts about Nationwide, so our headquarters are in Swindon, which is prior to the pandemic where the majority of our head office staff worked. We also have offices in London where I'm based, and then also in Bournemouth. We have 13,000 staff in branches, call centres, offices, and obviously working at home at the moment as well. And 700 branches all around the country serving 15 million members, which is about 1 in 4 people who have an account Nationwide.
And to tell you a little bit more about the Technology Development Programme itself, the Technology Development Programme has 3 different pathways. So that one suitable for industrial placement students, one for apprentices, and another one for graduates, and they're called the IP, Apprentice, and Accelerator pathways. The Technology Development Programme itself is comprised of really 2 different parts. The first part being the Technology Academy, and that's where everybody comes together right at the beginning of the programme to go through some training provided by QA. And that was delivered entirely virtually when I started my TDP job. And it's really a good chance to gain those really important skills that you need for a job in technology if you've not had them before, or to refresh them if you have got a little bit of a background in tech. And then after that, you go on to working on some live projects. You get placed in a team within Nationwide, and there are loads of different projects that you could be potentially working on, including open banking, security, and data and analytics.
Brilliant, thank you. So preparing for an interview. So in this section, we're just going to kind of talk through how to research when you're about to have an interview with a company and what to research. So research is always 100% the most important thing that you can do when you're preparing for an interview. It's not only a really good chance for you to research the company and understand how they work and understand if they're a good fit for you and what kind of role you're looking for, but also it will give you the confidence when you go into your interview to know that you've done as much research as possible, you understand the role, you understand the company, you understand the industry, and it will give your interviewer kind of that impression that you're interested in the role, you're excited about the opportunity, and really kind of give you that confidence when you go into an interview. So there's a few different ways that you can do research to make sure that you're kind of getting a full overview of the company that you're interviewing with. So a good place to start is always the company website. Kind of big or small, obviously most companies will have a website where you can find out overall information about what they do, but also look at things like their values and how do they align to yours. What is their culture like? For example, you'll be able to tell from the website if it's kind of a more startup culture or if it might be more kind of corporate. You can get a good idea from the website kind of how they look and how their tone of voice is, what kind of culture it is, how you'll kind of fit in with. The other thing to research is the role and the industry. So obviously the role is really important to know exactly what you'll be doing, if there are any kind of qualifications that you need for that role, or anything that kind of goes alongside, learning about the different kind of technologies that you need to use, but also the industry as well. So what are the industry trends? Are there any new technologies being used in the industry that you could speak about in your interview to kind of show that you have a really deep understanding of the role that you're going into and really demonstrating why you want to do that role. And then news and social media as well. So a really, really good idea to look in the news and see if there's any kind of updates about the company that you're interviewing for. Do they have any recent company updates? Have they got some new clients? Are they working on any exciting projects, or are they leading on any new kind of technologies in the industry? And then also have a look at their social media. So on their social media, LinkedIn or Instagram, you can kind of get a feel for how the company works. How do they speak to their customers, or how do they speak to their colleagues? What are they kind of doing outside the kind of product or service that they provide? For example, do they have charity work that they're doing, or do they have different networks? So social media is a really good place to kind of get a deeper understanding of the kind of day-to-day running of the company as well. So just using Nationwide as an example, and what you could find out about Nationwide if you were, say, preparing for an interview with us, what you could find on our website, what you could find on social media that might aid you in your preparation for an interview. So this Pride illustration that you can see here is that is our values that kind of underpin everything we do, whether that's with our members or whether that's with colleagues and we work day to day, or suppliers, anyone that we kind of communicate. These values kind of underpin what we do. So Pride is also a way of us recognizing colleagues for the great work that they're doing as well. So the P stands for putting members and their money first, R is rising to the challenge, I is inspiring trust, D is doing the right thing, and E is empowering each other. So all of these kind of relate to every project, every piece of work that we do. And during an interview, say you were interviewing with Nationwide, we would be looking at how your values align to our Pride values that we live by. So kind of giving you an example of what you would kind of find on our website about how we operate and what kind of values we uphold as well. And then on the right, this is our cornerstone logo that some of you may have seen potentially before. But all of these different cornerstones on here, you can see we've got building pride, building a national treasure, building legendary service, building thriving membership, and built to last are the kind of cornerstones that make up how Nationwide works, what we're always striving to achieve, and what everything we do kind of fits into a cornerstone of that, so that we know we're all working towards the same common goal. So really important to kind of research those kind of main goals that kind of bind a company together. And then we've also got something from social media for International Women's Day, which was a big International Women's Day campaign that Nationwide did, run by our gender network, and that was kind of on LinkedIn and on Twitter and Facebook. So going on those forms of social media, you can see what we do outside of just providing a service to our members, but also how we're choosing to challenge an International Women's Day as well. So preparing for interview questions. So once you've done all of your research, You understand how the company works, you understand what the role is and kind of the industry. The next kind of step is to look at the job description and see what skills and competencies they're looking for in the job description. So they might be looking for a range of different skills, from analytical skills or communication skills or whatever it might be. Every role will kind of be different, but have a look at the job description and see what skills and competencies they are looking for. And then once you've done that, think about when you have demonstrated these competencies in the past. So this might be from your past roles, or charity work you've done, or you might have played in a sports team, or even from university projects that you've done. And you can really start to think, when have I demonstrated all these different skills that they're looking for, so you can really show that in your interview that you're able to do the skills that they're looking for. So once you've done that, a really good technique to use for competency-based questions is the STAR technique. So a competency-based question is a question that will look to assess a specific competency that they are looking for in the role. And it will usually ask for a specific example for you to give from one of the kind of areas that I mentioned before, university or work, and talk about what you did in the situation and what the result was. So the STAR technique is situation, task, action, result. And it's a really good way of making sure that you are structuring your answers kind of coherently and getting across your point in the best way possible. So situation, you'd obviously kind of explain the context. Task, you'd give kind of more information on what you had to do. Action is probably the most important one, where you'd kind of explain specifically what you did in the specific situation and what kind of impact you made. And then result is what the end result was. And I think a couple of important points for when you're using the STAR technique is to make sure that you're always specifically talking about what you did. So rather than talking about your team, talk about specifically kind of what impact you had on the situation, and kind of on the result as well. And if the result isn't necessarily kind of, if things didn't go to plan or if things kind of changed, then it's fine to say that, but just kind of outline what you learned from the situation, what you do differently next time. So it's a good idea when you're preparing for competency-based questions to structure your answers in this way and write it out and kind of practice saying it, so that you're ready for an interview and you kind of know how questions should be structured. So types of questions. So obviously there's so many different types of questions that you could be asked, and they'll vary from different companies and different roles. But there are some that usually you can kind of expect to have some variation of that you can prepare for. So kind of the main questions that you can usually expect to be asked is, why do you want to work here and why are you interested in this role? So thinking back to the research that you've done, think about why that research, what you found that's interesting about the company and why that would apply to why you want to work there. So for example, it could be they have really good diversity and inclusion initiatives, they're like leading on new technologies, they're kind of an industry leader. All that kind of different research you've done into the company, you can incorporate into these questions about why you want to work somewhere. And I would usually say have about 3 points for each question about why you want to work for the company and why you want to work in the role, so that you can really give kind of an in-depth answer and show that you've done your research well. And this is an example of a competency-based question. So can you tell me about a time when you worked in a team and encountered a problem? How did you deal with it and what was the result? So for example, this type of question would be looking for kind of your problem-solving skills, also potentially your communication skills. So what you would do in this situation is think back to your examples that you've got in different situations and how you can kind of explain how you would deal with an issue, think about how you problem solve and how you can apply it to the question. So interviewing virtually. So obviously currently most interviews are being done virtually, and although it does kind of take the pressure off in some sense, because you don't have to worry about like going into an office and finding the office building and transport delays or whatever, it makes things easier. But there are a couple of things to just remember and consider when you are interviewing virtually, just to make sure you're kind of putting your best self forward and making the best impression. So when you're interviewing virtually, really important to consider your background and avoid any distractions, whether that's from your devices, your laptop or your phone, or from your household. So with your background, just kind of make sure you haven't got too many distractions like posters and pictures, just so it doesn't distract you or the person interviewing you. And make sure you just kind of tell your household that what you're doing, so you don't have anyone kind of walking in when you're mid-interview question, or your phone ringing. And although it's likely that someone will be understanding, you don't want it to kind of throw you off or kind of distract you during your interview. So just a couple of kind of points to consider. And then another important one is to kind of treat the interview as you would an in-person interview. So although you're not physically going into an office, kind of consider your presentation and how you dress. You still do want to put forward a good impression. So kind of considering, dressing professionally as you would for a normal interview if you were going into an office. Consider your body language. So kind of maintaining eye contact, posture, making sure you're speaking clearly and as kind of coherently as possible, and really like emphasizing your points as well. So yeah, just kind of consider your whole background and how you're kind of going to be being perceived, as you want to kind of make sure you're maintaining that professional image throughout your interview. And then what to do if you're stuck. So obviously there are going to be situations where you might not be able to answer the question, or might need a couple of moments to think about it. So there's a couple of things that you can do during your interview if you just need a moment to take a step back and consider what you want to say. So don't be afraid to ask for time to think about the answer. So don't be afraid to ask your interviewer to say, can I just have a couple of moments to think about this? And be kind of thorough and thoughtful in your answer, or ask the interviewer to repeat the question, or ask to come back to it at the end. So it's usually a good idea if you're kind of stuck on a question to just say, can I have a couple of moments to think about it? Try and kind of think through the research that you've done, think through kind of the skills that you have, and think how you can best answer that question. And if you can't answer the question, then it's always a good idea to say, can we come back to it at the end? And if you really are stuck on the question, if for example it was a competency-based question, you could just kind of say what you would do in the situation if you don't have a specific situation that you can talk about from your experience. Just kind of given the interviewer an idea of what you would do if you kind of came into contact with that situation. So what questions to ask the interviewer? So I think it's really important to mention that when you are having an interview, although the interviewer or the company is asking you the questions, it's also it's kind of a two-way street, because you want to find out as much as you can about the company as well to see if it is the right fit for you. So it's really good time at the end of an interview or throughout the interview, depending on kind of like the structure of the interview, just to ask as many questions as possible and really find out as much about the company as you can, to kind of build up your view of it, and take notes if you have a notepad and pen by you, so you can write down any notes, just so you kind of can remember everything that they've told you, to kind of again build up your image of the company and how it works. So obviously questions that you want to ask will vary, but things like, what's the company culture like? What do you enjoy about working for this company? Are good ones to ask just to get their experience. What do they like about it? And then also, what do you think would be my biggest challenge if I were to join this team? So obviously you might have questions that are a bit more specific to your actual role, or kind of qualifications, or specific technology. So good to ask kind of specific and relevant questions as well, but do make sure you use the time at the end of an interview to ask questions. And you might even mention, for example, if you'd read something in the news about a company, you might even bring that up and see if you can start kind of a conversation with your interviewer about something that you've come across as well. So yeah, really important to mention, to note that it is a two-way street. It's not just you being kind of asked all the questions. It is your chance to kind of interview at the end as well, just to kind of make sure you're finding out as much as possible about them as well. So that is kind of the main points from our interview skills. Now I'm going to pass over to Elle, who, as she mentioned, is on the Technology Development Programme and will give you a bit of an insight into her experience.
Yeah, so I wanted to talk a little bit about the experiences that I had applying for jobs remotely, doing interviews and everything like that, because I feel like there's a lot of information out there on what to do in an interview, but until you've actually been through it, it's quite difficult to understand what it's actually going to be like. And there are definitely some things that I really wish I knew before I'd done those interviews. So I thought it'd be nice to share with them now. The biggest thing for me is preparing. So when you go into that job application on the website or anything like that, when you found a job that you really, really like the look of and you're definitely looking to apply to, preparation should be the first thing on your mind. Doing things like, as Isabel said, doing the research about that company and really get to know not just more about the company, but more about why you want to work for them. It's all right if they're a really great, cool company that everybody would want to work for, but you need to know really why you want to work for them and also why you would be a beneficial person to be hired by them. What skills can you bring to this role that make you stand out from everybody else? And while that can be a really difficult question to sort of reflect on and think about, well, what makes me so good? What makes me deserve this job? It is really important one to think about, and it's definitely something where you shouldn't downplay any abilities or any experiences that you've had previously, whether that's through university or through job experience. Another thing is preparing for the online part of the application. Nowadays, pretty much everything is online, so you might have your interview and applicant day online as well. But the most important online part before that is things like psychometric testing, and they often get overlooked. But for me, psychometric testing is the hardest part of any job interview. They are brutal, but if you can prepare as much as you can, then you're giving yourself absolutely the best shot. There are a lot of online courses you can take or free little websites that you can play around with to get some practice in psychometric testing. But that is so useful when you're going into job applications because they're the biggest pitfall for me, especially. And then depending on what job you're applying for, they could also ask you to do a coding interview. So if you're going for a software engineering, it might be a graduate scheme or something like that. More often than not, you might be asked to do a coding test. I know for the technology development program at Nationwide, there wasn't a coding test that I had to do. There were some psychometrics, but there was no coding part of that. But there definitely are out there. So things like HackerRank and LeetCode are the best place to go to practice those small little algorithm-based questions that always prop up in coding tests that are online. And then if that all goes well and you pass your psychometrics and your coding test, if there is one, you might then get asked to do a video interview. Again, preparation for that is really important, making sure all those things about your background and having a peace and quiet in the room when you're recording them is really important. But doing that research that you've done about the company beforehand and having that all, I like to have it all out on my desk in like mind maps so I can always refer back to it, is a really good thing to do if you're going to be put on the spot with questions that you've never seen before in a video interview. And the same for an in-person or I guess virtual interview now would be to just make sure you've got that preparation. You've either had a look at it before you go in or you've got it at hand so that you can refer back to it whenever you need to. And I think another thing that does get overlooked, especially now when we're coming into online assessment center days and interviews, is just to let yourself be in the best state of mind you can be. Obviously, you're bound to be nervous because they are extremely nerve-wracking experiences, but making sure that you're comfortable You're dressed smartly, but you know, within reason, you are at home, so it doesn't matter if you've got your slippers on, no one's going to see them. Whatever makes you feel comfortable, and making sure you take drinks and making sure that you're as comfortable as you can be to go and put yourself, your best self forward for that interview is really, really important. And yeah, interviews are really, really difficult, and I don't think there's anybody in the world who hasn't found them difficult, especially when you're first starting out. But at the end of the day, what you need to do is show to that employer the best version of yourself you can, and make sure that you can convince them of just how awesome you are.
Yeah, and thank you. And I think another thing to mention is a lot of with interviews, a lot of it kind of comes with practice. So even if you have a question that you in an interview just that completely stumps you, and you think, oh, that went terribly, you know, for next time, and you've got that experience. So it's all just kind of a learning curve, really. And the more you do, and especially with assessment centres as well, the more you do and the more experience you get, the more confident you'll feel going in. So yeah, don't worry if kind of your first interview you don't think it goes well, or if you don't get the role. It all kind of comes with practice. So just keep persevering. Do we have any questions?
Just a big thank you to you two first for the session. That was awesome. I think if anyone's got any questions, let us know in the chat. I think from me, yeah, it was really interesting to hear the preparation aspect of things. I think certainly from my perspective is the biggest thing that's helped. And the biggest piece of advice I had was just research, research, research. I think whatever kind of you're going into. And for me, that was not only to help get the job, it was to think, do I actually want this job? You know, is it for me? Is it the right thing? Because I think culture is so important now, that by researching you find out things that not only may impress the employer within an interview, but also yeah, on a personal level, kind of helping out. So yeah, I think that that'd just be my kind of 2 cents to add to what you guys have said. But it doesn't look like there's too many questions. I think if there are, Nationwide obviously have a channel on our Discord server, which is still active. We'll add a few links in there. You can get on the giveaway form still. That's open till tomorrow, so we'll post that in there. And yeah, just a big thank you for Isabella now, not just for today's session, but also for your help throughout the hack as well.
You're welcome. It was really enjoyable being involved with everything so far. So thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank
No.
you. It's been lots of fun.
Yeah.
Awesome. And thank you everyone for watching. Like I say, if you've got any questions, let us know on Discord. But if not, I'll speak to you all tomorrow at the results, which is extremely exciting. So yeah, thank you everyone. Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye.